Hello, everyone! Welcome to TuesDnD! Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. I am your host, Kay Purcell. I do stuff on the internet, largely around TTRPGs at this point. With me, returning gloriously, is my co-host, David Lee, full rubber ducky. David, say hi.
Hi. Special thank you to Sophie, Not So Gladiator on Twitter, for filling in for me last week. I appreciate it.
Yes, you are the best. So, welcome for those of you who are new here. TuesDnD is a weekly talk show where we talk about D&D. We find, occasionally, we get to have fun with some hot takes. We do tips, we do talks about cultural issues, we kind of find stuff and go deep whenever possible. And this week, I am very happy to say we got a little bit of spice again.
One other thing that we do that I want our viewers to know is that we also, I don't want to say we give advice, but we give our own personal insights on the different aspects of building and running and existing in campaigns.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, speaking of, I have now wrapped up Dead Planet. That was a wrap on Sunday. Thank you for those of you who joined me for that story. Coming up this Saturday, this very Saturday at noon Eastern, I'm going to be in the Mercy Road 3 charity stream benefiting Child's Play. I'm going to be playing a very unique character that I've actually been itching to play. I almost played her with Gabe, but very excited for that one. So if you like games, if you like helping kids, if you like TTRPGs, come by. It's going to be a really fun 24-hour charity stream. I will be in the first 3 hours of it, playing with one of my personal TTRPG heroes, Brian Gray. Can't wait. I have some other things coming up that I can't talk about yet. So soon I will have more to talk about. I'm just not there yet. David, do you have anything to promote other than the fact that we're going to be hopefully casting soon?
Other than our casting soon, we will have seats at a private table on our Discord server, so join our Discord server, hopefully by midsummer.
I think I set up the command. Let me find out. Ha! I did the thing. And yes, we are also experimenting with things like play by post. So yes, come on by. We'll be having a good old time. So today's topic, we are going to be talking about this. I am going to copy paste the image itself because I am unwilling to give a platform to the individual who made this post. We do not highlight people. This is a DM who showed a screenshot of the backstories of their characters. There's like one player at the bottom had like literally 2 bullet points, and like maybe 3. There's maybe 3 bullet points there. And then another one who had like this much, and another one had this much, and another one had this much, and then one person who had, I mean, it's a pretty impressive novel of bullet points, even for me. And I feel like that says something. Right. And they have, one player's backstory and then all 4 players' backstories. And this was tweeted with the comment, guess which D&D character is getting offed within 2 sessions? It's good to be the DM.
Toxic as shit.
Yeah, that's a little bit toxic. I'm not sure who hurt him. Hey, Vivian, thank you for hanging out. So I wanted to spend, first off, that's a bad take. Number one, it is not your job or your goal as a DM to kill your players' characters. Unless you're in a module that you do that. There are meat grinders where you can just churn out, new characters, and if that's what you and your players signed up to do, that's cool, right? Play the game you want to play if you want to constantly be making new characters. But the idea that a DM went and looked, someone spent pages and pages and pages of building this character. I can't wait to take that character away from this person who's here to have fun. That's a little not okay.
There's so many things wrong. So many things wrong with this. And I'm sure that I'm sure that you will fill in the things that I miss. But first and foremost, one, we're all here to have a good time. And if you're going to purposely block this person from having a good time, then you shouldn't be DMing. Or at least you shouldn't be DMing this person. Like, right. Also, the passive aggressive pettiness of this, because it's really easy as a DM to say, hey, this is a little overwhelming for me. Give me the too long didn't read summary of it. And I will circle back to it. But no, he didn't do that. And also, like, Dungeons and Dragons, like open tabletop RPGs like this are a matter of group creativity. Mm-hmm. It is collaborative storytelling. So why would you then punish somebody for eagerly participating in the core concept of the whole reason that you guys got together?
Great. So now, with that said, I'm going to point out that as a compulsive overwriter myself, David has seen some of my character backgrounds. I don't know that I've gone to this level, but I have definitely gone near it. Sometimes having
I wouldn't say so. But yeah, no, continue.
Sometimes having a character description that long can be indicative of something. You just are so happy with that ducky emote.
I am eternally pleased.
We commissioned some new emotes for the channel, and David got his nervous rubber ducky, and
it's my favorite.
Yes, I'm very happy. I'm very pleased. I have an amazing emote artist if anyone needs them. So there are this post in and of itself, that much text could be a red flag. There could be an indication that this could be a problem player and or character. Because problem characters and problem players are often the same, but not always the same. Hey, Steve. So let's talk about why a post this long could potentially be a red flag. This is the post we are discussing. I've dropped it in chat again for anyone who missed our little intro. So this could be a warning sign that you could have a character with you could have a player with main character syndrome in the mix. Not guaranteed, but someone who the whole story has to be about me. My character's the coolest, the biggest, the best because here's all of the things that they have done type thing. And there's some simple ways to address that and figure out if that's the case, but we'll get into that later on. Backgrounds this dense, sometimes players, it might be deliberate, it might just be overexcited, it might be an attempt at metagaming. Sometimes players can try to slip in items or skills or things that are above their character level, or they will use this as an excuse to just be very difficult about everything. No, I should be able to do that because in my background, I did 6 jobs, so I should be able to do all the class skills for all of those jobs because I did that. That is a potential concern.
I have a level 2 paladin, but of course I can pick locks because in my youth I picked locks.
Right. I spent 6 months as a guard, as a soldier, so I know all the soldiers, and I can command the army now.
Right.
And there's also a chance, And this doesn't happen as often. I hear people warning about this a lot, but it doesn't seem to happen as much as people are afraid it's going to happen, that they've already told the story they want to tell. You know, they just wrote this whole novel of a thing. What else is there for their character to do? Well, let me tell you, as a person who can write a novel about a character, there's still a lot they can do.
Absolutely.
As an example, Mothership just concluded. I played Kai, who was an android who had only existed for 6 months. I was actually a fill character, so I came into Kai with very little background, on top of only having existed for 6 months. A couple of the characters were a little bit more loosey-goosey. We had one of our players who really liked to kind of learn and get to know their character as they went, which is a completely valid playstyle. It's not mine. I think my performance in the first episode or two could have been a little bit better had I had a little bit more knowledge and information to be able to go through and write out Kai's history and all that. I could easily have written a 5-page document just of what Kai experienced, how they felt about it, and all that for 6 months of existence. Easily. Wouldn't have been a problem for me. So again, the length of a character background does not necessarily dictate that they have told everything they want to tell about this character, or that they're trying to sneak skills or things into it. Sometimes it's just how we get to know our characters.
And sometimes it's important for reference. In multiple campaigns that I have run over the years, not only will there be large gaps between when you play, but there's also large gaps between when you conceive the character and when you need a piece of information. I had one of my characters, or one of my players, I was talking to them and I was like, hey, coming up, I'm going to put in a character that is from where you are from. Where are you from? And the player went, hold on, let me find the Google Doc from a year and a half ago to reference it. And so building out not just your character sheet, but this whole extra background is not just integral to the design of a character, but also a really important thing to have on hand. It's just like having your character sheet. If I say, hey, what's your wisdom save? I don't expect any player to know that off the top of their head. I expect them to go look at the piece of paper, go on D&D Beyond, go on Google Docs, wherever they have their character sheet, and reference it. And the same thing is true of important things about people's character. And a point that you made.
Oh, thank you. I will not look at that other screen. I will keep my mouse over here.
When we were talking in pre-show, you brought up the point of, man, that cursor really threw me off, and I completely forgot what my point is.
I don't know, something I brought up in pre-show.
Let's see. Talking about characters.
Referencing your character. This is your history is as much as your character sheet.
Oh, about giving something to the DM. So, Kay with and I've been fortunate enough to read through a lot of the documentation that Kay has put together for her characters. All of it is fascinating. 30 years from now, when there is a LACMA or a MoMA exhibit to Kay, those pages are going to be there, and it's going to be hilarious, and people are going to walk in and go, wow, she really was nuts. But having copies of that stuff, even if I don't read through all of it immediately, 6 months, 3 months, or when... So part of how I organize my games is, in addition to the overall story arc, I try to build in arcs for each of the characters, which is a whole thing we'll discuss later. But then 4 months later, after I've worked on, after the group has gone through arcs for different people, when it circles back to this character, I could go, I don't remember anything about this character, go grab the document and do a breeze through and then be up to date. Now, if someone gives me 2 bullet points for a character, and 6 months later, I look at those 2 bullet points and try to build a whole character arc for them within my campaign,
That's so frustrating.
I'm going to reach through the computer and choke them a little bit.
Well, and if that is... So I have a section here, like, in my little notes of what we're going to do for this one. Consensually, yes. Consensually-ish. I have a bullet point, or I have a subsection for bullet points that says how to not piss off your DM. Because, yes, if you are like me and you are loquacious and you are a person who gets to know your character by writing for them. I have a character that I can't talk about yet for a project that I can't talk about yet, that, like, is coming in at a higher level in a setting, that has a background that would require them to have done a lot of stuff. It doesn't make sense for this. This is not a new adventurer. This is a character who has been around, who has leveled up to this particular level, who has traveled a lot, so they needed to have a lot of story. Well, I had to write that story. And writing, actually, instead of just... And again, some people don't have to. Some people can just kind of be like, yeah, I needed to get to know this character and understand how they got from where I conceived them to the place where they're entering the game. I had to do that. And in doing so, I realized, oh, here's like 4 NPCs that are crucial to their development as a character. And I did the thing where... So how do you not, if you're a writer like this, how do you not piss off your DM? Well, first off, give them the whole doc, but then also at the same time, give them a TLDR section. And I specifically like to make a plot hooks and NPCs section. Again, sometimes I write too much. I understand. I don't expect anyone to read all my BS. That BS is written for me. So I had, like, here's plot hooks. Like, this character... worked with this group, has worked with people of this sort, so they'd be a great hook for that. They do this. This is how they make a living, so they might have heard these things. They needed a teacher. They needed a teacher character who would teach them this skill that they have. So, and that worked in their backstory that got them to being the kind of tortured soul character that they are. So I put that in, and it opened up a lot of doors that I was just able to hand my DM, like, because I don't know which way my DM wants to go with this character, right? But here's the people they knew as a child who may or may not be alive or around again. I might never see them again, but at least the DM has that. Here's their teacher characters that are still around, and will I ever see them again? I don't know. They're probably going to try to avoid them. It's going to be really fun drama if they run into them. Here's the entire other sect that my character doesn't even know about because they think they're really special, and it turns out they're not that special. So if you can, and I do this with... Okay, sometimes this can be hard to do because you've written this character, you have something of understanding. Like, this is part of why Matt Mercer is such a great DM, is because his players trust him. Players trust him to say, here is a character from my character's backstory. And this is a tip. If you want to not piss off your DM, only write what your character knows. Or if you are writing from like an omniscient, like throw out, my character believes this, what they don't know is, or my character thinks this, but there might be another. And if you do that, your DM is going to be like, oh, I have plans. And this is, once I trust a DM, and obviously like the Critical Role people trust Matt Mercer, once you trust a DM and you do that, that DM is going to pull your character into the heart of that story. And that's one way, once you gain that trust, you can really, your players don't necessarily have to send you a thing this long because they're like, I need to impact this story this way. They can say, okay, I was tutored by I want to play a bastard noble who worked with, you know, some kind of shady people who smuggled him out of the castle, but like he learned, right? They taught him, they kept him safe, but they're still not good people. Then the DM can be like, okay, you know, you don't have to sit here and go, this is the entire family line of my nobles. The DM can go, oh, well, this kingdom over here, that would work really well with this noble, and then they could have smuggled you over here, and suddenly you're co-creating before the game even starts.
And again, to circle back to co-creation, collaboration, communication. If as a player, give your DM a heads up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, part of that process of building your character, both within the system, but then also doing the personality and background creation, is to give your DM an idea of what is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Is your character going to be a gushy, tree-hugging druid, or maybe a gushy, tree-hugging warlock? Is your, you know, did they come up with their own patron? Like, all sorts, because you don't want to be 2 sessions in, or worse, 12 sessions in, and you go, but wait, my character is like this, and everyone is surprised, especially the DM. And
having the rest of the party surprised is really fun. Like my little, I have a Grave Domain Plant Genasi that I play in a game. And for the first 4 sessions, everyone thought they were a druid. Even though they're out there casting cleric spells, thought they were a druid because plant person.
Right, plant.
Right. So that can be fun. The DM is all like, oh, it's funny you think that. Ah, I see who's been paying attention. If the DM had been surprised, that would have been bad.
Right. They did that in Exandria Unlimited, where Matt Mercer's character was...
He's a divine soul sorcerer.
Right. And just kept casting spells that kind of put people on their toes. One second. But
that was more than a second.
I should have said a moment. But specifically in regards to the shitpost that we were referencing earlier, that isn't about being a player. That's about being a DM. How to not be a shitty DM in this situation. And it's important that you, again, collaborative. It's important that you communicate, because every DM will eventually run into a player or a character that the player has built where you're going, whoa, this is I can't with this. And it could be something as simple as you're running a one shot and the character is so complicated and has so much to unpack that there wouldn't be room for any like action or activity in that setting. Or it could be this character is going to be an edgelord that is going to need to be dragged kicking and screaming into the story. And no one wants to play in a game where 4 people are sitting at a table in a tavern and the 5th person is like, well, I don't want to. Why should I do this? And then everybody else has to sit around and convince that person to be a part of whatever that you're doing. And that's also why 0 sessions and sort of like 0 session documents are important, because one of the things that both Kay and I put in our documents is we're moving forward under the assumption that your character wants to be a part of this.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to railroad anybody, but that is a prerequisite to play in our games, especially in shorter campaigns and in one-shots. Because if you spend the first hour of your one-shot trying to convince 1 or 2 people to actually take up arms and do the thing, then not only is no one having a good time, but it doesn't make for a good stream either.
Right. And So that's the other caveat I will give. If someone gives you this background for a one-shot or a 2-session game, no. And I understand, and we've gone off about this before, but I'm going to say it again. Everyone wants to bring their really bananas strange character to the one-shot, because when else are you going to get to play a character this off the wall? And that's great, so long as it's just an interesting off-the-wall character and you don't expect everyone to go into their entire history. Because if you have 6 bananas off-the-wall characters where you could spend 6 sessions each unpacking each of their backgrounds, everyone's going to walk away upset that they didn't get to go into their character background, and we didn't have time to get to the big bad because everyone was so focused on trying to tell their character story. Don't, like, one shot, like, you gotta all row the same direction in a one shot. Please. I'm begging you. Come into the one shot to play the one shot and test out a character. Don't expect to get into any backstory. And yes,
Right.
everyone gets an elevator pitch, and then you move on. And again, part of the reason that a thing might be this long is, you know, hey, I was playing in a game where, like, your player might be telling you something. They might be telling you, I really want to play an edgelord. But if you're playing, you know, happy tree friends, kind of, we're all going to be super happy and wholesome and besties, maybe that's not the right character for this.
That is such a conflicting reference, but
I'm so happy
and again, like, as a DM, it's your responsibility to rank all your players. So you're the one who sets the tone for the campaign. You're the one who helps players build their characters. And that's part of why 0 sessions are really important, because not only do you get to, like, chit chat over the correct way to build out your characters, and so that you can answer simple questions, like, every time, 100% of the time when we're doing 5e, both Kay and I, as players and as DMs, we've received the question of, how do you want to roll? Do you want to do your standard deviation? Do you want to do point buy? Like how are
you getting your character stats? Not necessarily are you rolling physically or digitally. Though that often comes up too.
Right. And that's obviously a very central thing to, because, like, if you want to play a really badass rogue and you roll a 9 on Dex, then and you could do that for thematic reasons, but if you want to do the power fantasy of having a cool rogue and then you roll super low on your Dex, that's a conversation that you have with your DM. Like, you're not going to have fun if you just click random on the generator and then show up to the game with stats you don't like. And then on the flip side, if, you know, you say to your players, just go ahead and roll, and then somebody shows up with 4 18s and a couple of 16s, then you're going to be like, all right, bud, like, we gotta talk.
Yeah.
But it's your job as a DM to set the tone, to educate everybody on the rules, to enforce those rules.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when it's thematically reasonable to bend or break those rules. Again, referencing Matt Mercer, like, rules as written is a potion is an action. And I don't know if you've ever been to a frat party, but it doesn't take 6 seconds to put down 12 ounces of liquid. Even if it tastes terrible. Like, have you ever had Daddy Light? Like, hoo-wee. And them footballers just, down it goes.
But also, it's so much more fun in combat to be able to do something and then chug your potion as a bonus action.
Right.
It makes the game, it's not just a logic thing, it also makes the game more fun. maybe more difficult for the DM, but more fun for the players, and combat goes faster, and a lot of Matt Mercer's homebrew rules are to make combat go faster.
But as a DM, doing that petty, snarky, tee-hee, I'm going to sabotage someone's fun, instead of talking to them and working through it together so that you both have a great experience. And if something in game that a player wants or that's really cool makes more work for me as a DM, I'm totally okay with that.
I can speak to spiders, and that made his life very difficult.
Right. Ooh-wee. I had to speak as a horse, and it was a thing. Anyway, but the other thing is, because you as a DM, you're the one who sets the tone, you can look at a 5-page character document and be like, yo, this is a dungeon crawl. We're going to go and we're going to smack a couple of orcs and a kobold or two and then get out of there. We don't need all this. That's a conversation you have with your player. You don't just, have them go, oh, I have this complicated, backstory, and then you as a DM go, all right, show us a picture of your kid. And then he's like, oh, here's my wife and daughter at home, and then like a rock crushes you immediately. Like that's not cool. And I've sat at tables where DMs have gone, if you want to sit at my table, if you want to play with us, you need to have your main character rolled, and then a backup character rolled, and then a backup character rolled. And I'm sure that the Dark Souls approach to D&D is appealing for some people, but especially for systems that require a lot of time for character design, where they're particularly crunchy, or for someone like me who for a long time I had trouble sorting out what characters I wanted to embody in this game. If you want to play the character that you play, and then your DM immediately is like, they're not going to make it. They're going to get 2 or 3 levels and then they're going to be dead. You got to come up with somebody else.
And again,
I'm not going to play there.
There are meat grinder games, right? There are times when you're like, hey, we're going to go in, I'm going to throw everything at you. You're going to get to do really high level spells and you'll probably die, right? But we're going to have a good time. Like, if that's what you're getting into, great. But don't set people, like, if a great example of this for me is Dimension 20's A Crown of Candy. It sounds sweet. It's a crown of candy. It's a Game of Thrones. Main characters die. More than one main character dies in that. And everyone playing it, and Dimension 20 tends to be a little bit more fluffy and happy stories. It's fantasy high, right? But this one was brutal, and it was so ironic because they're like candy people. They're literally, one of them's a gummy bear. And they're getting brutally murdered. And everyone knew.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, everyone knew what they were getting into. And yes, it was sad and emotional when those characters died, but no one was like betrayed. No one was upset because they went in knowing what it was. So yes, talk about it. Yes, everybody dies. That's kind of what Saucefire is going to be DMing the charity stream that I'm going to be on Saturday. And yeah, it might be everybody dies. I can't wait to show the character that might die. It's going to be a good time.
But we've spent some time railing on this shit post, and I could spend the next 2 hours on my soapbox about why this person is wrong. But it is a good segue into a topic that both Kay and I have wanted to get into on the channel, and that is building characters. And really, Kay is the expert when it comes to building player characters, just because she's built more player characters than literally anyone else I know combined. But when you are building a character to play in a campaign, there are a lot of things you have to weigh, and it's especially tough if you're going into a campaign and you don't know the other people that you're playing with, and you don't know the characters that they're playing. I continue to be incredibly fortunate about the group that I'm running with now, because I asked each of them individually, hey, what do you want to play? And they go, what does the group need? Every single person said that. They're like, do you need a healer? I can play a healer. I'm like, listen, we're not there yet. I haven't gotten anybody. Like, no, but whatever, get everybody else's first, and then whatever role needs to be filled, that's what I'll do. And I had that conversation 4 times in a row, which is great.
I mean, in my defense, I have like I have at least one of every character, 3 of some.
Yep. A sexy mummy race.
I mean, I don't want to be a sexy mummy, but I would like to bear witness to the sexy mummy race.
Actually, an undead campaign would be interesting.
Oh, I want to play an undead. The Reborn. I want to play a Reborn so badly. Actually, I want to play a Dunpeel more. Like, my name is Damphir, and I still haven't played a Dunpeel. That's a problem. I know who I'd play too. But yes, so I talked a little bit earlier about building in plot hooks and kind of giving your DM opportunities.
Let me interrupt you.
Oh,
Instead, walk us through your character design philosophy. Like walk us through how you do this.
Which one?
Pick one and go.
Gods. This is not fair. I am on the spot. There's too many. I need direction. So I usually start with, I don't know, every character comes to me differently. That's just a fact. Like, I know that sounds like pretentious or whatever, but no, I don't. But okay, Vimond. Someday I will get to play Vimond. And I'm not going to tell you everything about Vimond, because if I ever get to play Vimond on stream, I'm really excited for everyone to get to know Vimond's secrets and all that. Vimond is a little bit who I was referencing earlier. There is like they're like a bastard. They're the, hey, Yuggles! They're an illegitimate child of a nobility. Which nobility? I don't know. I don't care. That's up to my DM. But I do have, like, there were certain things that happened, right? I wanted to play. Now, it's funny, because a couple times now, I've been like, I want to play a character. So, like, for Vimond, like, I was like, I want to play a character who kind of is able to tap into I want to play a rogue who's able to tap into some sort of supernatural abilities around, around the people he kills. And then Wizards of the Coast made a whole subclass for it. With Kinley, I wanted to play a character who kind of accidentally, through dreams, wandered in and out of the Feywild. And then they
released a Feywild book.
And the Fey Lost class or background is so exactly Kinley that my DM asked if I consulted on this. It is disturbing.
Great minds. Great minds.
So I can't talk about this other character yet, but so I often kind of start with kind of an idea or a question I want answered. So, like, with actually Roxy, my paladin of the flying spaghetti monster, was something of an exercise in empathy. I'm like, how can I better relate to understand people who feel very differently about religion than I do? And so that was kind of like, how can I build a little bit more tolerance towards some of this stuff? And clearly I needed to play someone who was completely dedicated to their god. Well, how do I deal with that, embodying that? That was going to be difficult for me until, like, it kind of came to me that, like, and then the other thing I was chasing was, like, how can you actually be a religious outsider in D&D? Like, the question of how can you be an atheist in D&D has always been fascinating for me. Because, like, oh yeah, I worshipped a god and he died. Yeah, cool. That's normal. Okay, I worship this god. Oh, he's not really that powerful. Oh, you should probably worship someone more powerful. Right? Like, there's just not this god isn't very popular. Oh, they're an evil god, but there's a lot of evil gods, so maybe be careful. Maybe we don't trust you, but, like... And I kind of figured out the only way you could really get that kind of religious isolationism. The only way you could do this thing where no one understood what you felt and why you believed what you did was to just worship the one god that everyone knew was a joke. And that's how I became a paladin of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. And then it also being the Spaghetti Monster, you know, it not being one of a doom and gloom, an overly promised, like any kind of that god, allowed me to have a little bit more fun with it. And again, David will confirm, I, as Kay, recognize that this is ridiculous, but my character believes it, so I get to just deliver the most heartfelt speeches.
It is so earnest.
And lectures about how, you know, the Flying Spaghetti Monster created Midget and the other original races in the Olive Garden of Eden. And just keep going and straight facing it. And that's a treat.
So much pain.
Vimond, I wanted to kind of play this, like, character who is privileged, who has had... No, their life hasn't been easy, but they have a lot of tools, and they have learned to use all of those tools to get ahead, but are now in a situation where they don't necessarily have access to all those tools, or they're in a situation where those tools can be taken from them, and they're having to prove to the world what they believe in their hearts is already true. And so then, you know, I generally start with an idea like that, and then I work backwards of, okay, where did this character start? And then that's just kind of my process, is I just like write. And I have to go from, okay, you know, this character was a bastard. Cool. His mom this is how his mom got pregnant. How did they get from here to this place where she's like in a small town reading tarot cards? Okay, and then she taught him tarot cards. How did he get back from the small town into the space of the king? Why is he now off in whatever space this is? And then how do all of these other elements that I have plugged into this character connect? And for me, the only way to do that is to write it out. I'm sure there's better methods. That's just what I got.
And the important takeaway, as someone who wants to learn about building player characters from Kay, is first and foremost, there are multiple ways to get into your character. You can
we had a dad redemption. Welcome, Todd.
Yes, hi, Todd. You could start with a theme. You can start with the idea of exploring a concept. Or you can just go, I have a cool idea and I want to run with it. Because, again, let us remember that often, most of the time in tabletop, it is an exploration of a power fantasy. So if you build out a cool character that's really strong at a thing, that's great.
And you can even I've built a couple characters out of just straight up mechanics. So like with Ito, when we did the orc game, I was, someone said, the DM said, hey, I want to run a campaign of all orcs. And I'm like, was looking up 5e at around that time, and I saw that like orcs generally considered halflings to be lucky. And I'm like, what if I played a halfling? Because I thought that would be like a cool mechanic or a cool lore thing to lean into, of like this halfling that half orcs generally find lucky is suddenly thrown in with a group of actual orcs. How does that play out? Even a little bit with Kai. I had kind of said when we were talking about Mothership, and it was like, they were like, what do you want to play? And we were kind of going back and forth, and I was thinking, what if I do a creepy Uncanny Valley android? And that was in my head, and I'd kind of said it. And then I looked at the rules, and it was like, all friendly allies make fear saves at a disadvantage with the android nearby. And I'm like, that fits. I guess I'm leaning into it. And I will say really quick, and then I know you've got a point you want to finish, but I will say also, when I start building out all of these stories, and I start, Vimond has all of these things that he's done. Roxy has this god that she worships. Again, I deliberately leave holes and plot hooks for my DM. Roxy believes in the Flying Spaghetti Monster. I, as the player, I don't know if the Flying Spaghetti Monster is real. or not. Might be real, and Roxy's literally the first person to find them. Might be that Roxy's just got her wires crossed and she's worshiping a real god who's not actually the flying spaghetti monster, just, you know, kind of vibes with that, and she's tapping into something and calling him the wrong name. A little rude, but, you know. Could be in 5e. Mechanics allow that if you are devoted enough to a god, it doesn't matter if that god's real, you can manifest powers based off a god that doesn't exist. Is the flying spaghetti monster good or bad, or even real? I told David, don't tell me. I, as the player, don't want to know because I want something to find out in the story. When I made my plant genasi, they and their siblings were kept in this underground kind of crypt and put to work all their lives by someone, by these creepy figures in dark robes, and they were asked to like transcribe stuff. And I told my DM, I'm like, I just want to be clear, I don't know who these people were. And she's like, I do. It's cool. If you get to watch Strixhaven ever, when I came up with Brandon, like Brandon is a T-Fork, half tiefling, half orc with a little, he's a Drake Warden Ranger, he's got a little baby dragon hanging out with them. He doesn't remember meeting the dragon. He remembers what led up to it, and he remembers having the dragon at that exact moment of how they met and why and how all that went down is fuzzy. And a DM can use that or not, right? I throw those hooks out there to give to let the DM pull me into the story when is appropriate, and it might not be appropriate. That might not be the thing we explore with my character, but I'll always get to wonder if this is the thing that's going to lead to that, and that's really exciting. Thank you for hanging out, Steve.
For anyone who's watching who's curious about Kay's Paladin and the Flying Spaghetti Monster, stay tuned, more will be revealed, because luckily I know the answer to all of Roxy's questions.
Don't tell me until I find out in game.
Not today, but I mean, like,
spoil it.
As we go on and more things happen in game, you can then come back and tell everybody how things shake out.
I'm very excited.
And the fallout from Roxy's discoveries. But
and my other character in this other project that I can't talk about yet was, I kind of had a loose idea, and the more I learned about the mechanics of this system, the more I went, oh, I'm doing exactly this thing. And the mechanics of the system started impacting the character, which started changing what I was picking as the mechanics of the system. And I can't wait for y'all to meet this character. Go, David. I'm going to stop interrupting you. David's volume is at 100%. I can turn mine down more, but you might just have to turn yours up. I will turn mine down more so you all can turn yours up.
Okay. But so like I said, there's I don't want to say there's no wrong way to get into your character creation, because someone will find out a way. It's like the second they make something idiot proof, they build a better idiot. But most of the ways that you approach to getting into it are viable. And, you know, even if you have like a rather like extreme power fantasy, like there are plenty of games out there where all the player characters are superheroes or supervillains. And there are entire tabletop systems designed around that. But the next important takeaway is Kay always talks to her DMs. She always communicates very clear and very, very early what her concepts are.
More than I potentially should.
What the gaps are, and again, it's collaborative. And if you are, as a player, want to build out a character, and you feel like your character is very flat, or you are sort of like lost on idea or direction, that's a good time to approach your DM and talk to them, because they know about the major story points in the game, or at least they should. And they can help guide you into a direction that plays into the story, or help you come up with something unique that your DM can then go and build something around.
That's how, that's what happened with Ozum in the God Plane, is Sophie sent me a lot of material, and we talked a lot about things that Ozem had been through and, you know, all of that stuff. And I took it all, and again, like, is it bad that there was a ton of it? I love having a ton of material because I sabotaged Sophie. I put her in a flashback and I quoted from her document word for word. And if Sophie could have killed me through the internet with her eyes.
Yeah. She did try to set you on fire with her brain.
Yes, absolutely. And that was a great moment as a DM. Like, that was why this take is so, like, trash. Because, like, yes, maybe this person probably does need to tone it down a little. Maybe they're just overly excited. Maybe they're new to D&D and they feel the need to, or maybe they just had a really bad experience. And this is them trying to, like, take some control. All of that's understandable, right? But instead of being like, I'm going to kill off this character so I don't have to deal with it, be a good DM and be like, yo, what are you, you know, it's just like when you start playing with someone and they're doing something, they're like, I do this thing, and you're like, you have to be like, wait, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do? What's important here? Because I need to understand what's important and I'll help you get there. Because that's the point of this, is for us all to get to the point where we tell a great story together. Todd is absolutely a no backstory GM. And respect, that's a system.
And again, that circles back to our earlier point of, like, as long as everybody's on the same page, great. And so when you start getting into your character and you start building it, what sort of things does your character need? And 5e gives you a very loose skeleton because they're like, well, here are backgrounds, here are personality types, here are flaws. And so it's like, are you an aristocrat? Are you a pauper? What sort of values do your characters have? And that is a very good starting point, but I want to emphasize that, at least for me, in the characters I build, both as a player and as a DM, that is at best a starting point. And so when you build out your characters, your characters need to have a history, a motivation, strengths, and flaws. And when it comes, so there's something that I read that Kay referenced in one of our earlier shows, where it's like, it's the idea of your explanations don't need to go too deep. Where you have a nun in the sewer fighting alligators. Why is the nun in the sewer fighting alligators? Because there are alligators in the sewers, and someone has to fight them.
Because that keeps the alligators keep the vampires out of the sewers.
Right.
Why don't vampires, if vampires can't be in the sun, why don't vampires go to the sewers? Because of the man-eating alligators that live down there. Why are there man-eating alligators in the sewers? Because the nuns are feeding them and making them grow to man-eating size. Why are there nuns feeding man-eating alligators? To keep the vampires out of the sewer.
Vampires out. And so if your character backstory is just that, like, logical loop, and that's as deep as it goes, great. If your character motivation is just that deep, great. Like, 90% of people who ever played a Kender, and may they all burn in the fires of hell, but 90% of people that have played a Kender, their entire personality is, ooh, shiny. Ooh, shiny, gold pocket. It's it. And guess what? You have players who've played Kenders for years. Kenders that have gotten to level 20 and gotten tons of play time because of that motivation. So your character has to have a motivation. And that motivation doesn't even necessarily have to apply to what campaign you're a part of.
The best motivations don't even make sense.
Right.
I didn't get to play her. but I had a kobold in a stolen steam-powered mech suit who was a paladin. And basically this mech suit was just falling apart, and only reason it didn't fall apart was she was just constantly casting mending on it. But she was a paladin of a god of avarice, and her goal was to steal so much and so fast from someone that they would be too ashamed to own anything ever again. That's a great motivation, because you can never actually accomplish that. This is a character who will be forever doing
not with
dumb
that
shit. Also, yes, Jen, we can talk about characters making dumb decisions and things we didn't think they would do. My paladin backhanded a head of a thieves guild last night because of a nat 1 wisdom roll.
I mean, in that same session, and now my camera's gone fuzzy, but in that same session, a DMPC did a whole bunch of stuff that I just was not planning on, and literally blew up an entire months-long storyline that I had set up by just like walking downstairs and like bitch slapping everyone involved, which was just it was fascinating, and I feel kind of bad for my players, but that's how it happens sometimes.
Todd would like to know what systems help the best with character flavor. So I don't have a good answer to this, because I actually tend to dislike systems that take away character agency or kind of dictate how characters are going to act or react. That's me personally. I do come from a writing background. One of the best... Yeah, Stephen King's on writing is good. I will also say, save the cat. If you, and you don't have to buy the book, but just Google the save the cat theory. And that's like, if you can come up with a save the cat, like what, you're walking down the street, your character sees a cat in a tree. Do they save the cat? Okay, yes. And what goes wrong? How do they save it? Do they save it by do they try to get the cat out of the tree by throwing a rock at it? Do they try to save the cat by climbing the tree? Do they not try to save the cat? Do they walk away? If they just walk away, what happens? Is there a little old lady who's like crossing the street and saying, "Oh, my kitty," and then gets run over with a car because you weren't trying to save the cat? And I recognize this is not directly answering the question which you asked, but if you can just in your head, get to know your character, again, not writing it out, but just be like, okay, a situation happens. And the thing about save the cat is you don't stop at, yes, my character would save the cat. You have to make it ridiculous. You have to go big. So, yes, my character climbs the tree to try to save the cat. Unaware, wow, do one of these, David. Do this, and then slowly bring your hand back to your face. My character climbs the tree. Once they're up there, wow, your camera's grumpy. Once they're up there, they find a wasp's nest. And they get stung by wasps. Do they keep going? Yes or no? Okay, so they do. They smack the wasps off them. They crawl out onto the branch. They reach for the cat scratches them. What do they do then, right? You have to go big and go ridiculous. And if you don't go really ridiculous, you're not really getting to the core of the character. And I know that sounds, but this is this is a tool that screenwriters use. And if you are, like, I can tell when people know the save the cat scene when I'm playing, when we're improvising. If someone takes it, and I was in an improv class, and we were like, part of improv is kind of the game, right? What's weird about the scene? What's special about the scene? What's important? So, like,
It's almost like collaborative storytelling.
I like to say D&D is improv with more rules. That's more fun than it sounds, I promise.
It's improv with math.
Yeah. But the math kind of keeps everyone playing the same game, because like one of the things, it's like, okay, we're it's two people in a scene, we're like, it's me and her, and we walk in and we're like, oh, look at this like store, we can get stuff for our new apartment that we just bought together. And she's like, yeah, look at this blood fountain, we should get the blood fountain. And it's like, okay, I understand what you're doing there, right? You found, like, you wanted to find something weird, but now we just went from newly moved in couple to, like, Satanist question mark? Like, and I can have fun with that, because then what we have to do is, you know, I don't know, honey, the blood fountain, we've already got, you know, the skull throne, so maybe we should get just something normal, right? But that person was doubling down on everything had to be too big and too weird, right? And so when you can find, like, if you can kind of learn, like, what's the game, what's the save the cat moment, how do I make this bigger in a way that doesn't break it? But if you could do the unexpected or the heartfelt, or, like, if you can get to the core of what's here, what's different, what's missing, what are these characters not talking about, and then talk about the thing that they're not talking about, or very obviously not talk about the thing they're not talking about, that's when you can get those really cool character moments where things just mesh and get to be fun.
And I love that you bring up the concept of save the cat. And Todd, I will circle back to your question. But it is so in modern media, both in literature and otherwise, you've had a burgeoning anti-hero. Anti-heroes, reluctant heroes, and then you've also had a growth of sympathetic villains, or at least villains that have a really good point. And
Magneto was right.
Right. and Xavier's an asshole.
He did some shady shit.
He does shady shit. But again, you have to have, for your protagonist, you have to have a save the cat moment. Like, no matter how awful, terrible, suspicious these people are, you have to have a say. Like, there's a Batman arc where he does his usual thing. Batman goes and spin kicks a drug dealer or some goon, and, you know, breaks his collarbone, his hip, whatever, and then he finds out that this man is doing what a lot of people who do crime do, and they're trying to put food on the table. And so Bruce Wayne shows up the next day in the hospital and is like, hey, when you get healed up, go here, call this number and we'll get you a job. And so, like, you could paint Batman as a villain because he just goes around and beats up people that have not even close to the same training that he does, and basically is punching down because he is a multi-billionaire. But he has that save the cat moment, that moment of heart that's like, oh, this character, like, this is a good thing that I can latch onto and cheer for this character. And conversely, with your villains, you need a kick the dog moment. And one of my favorite pictures in the history of the internet is there's this picture of Cobra Commander from the G.I. Joe comic books just booting some poor dog. And I'm like, that's a villain. That is peak villainy. That dog wouldn't do nothing to you.
All I'm going to say is, if you watch The Good Place and you know the tropes, you knew what was coming in The Good Place.
Yeah. I mean, we've all seen The Time Knife. But no matter how reasonable your villain is, they have to have a kick the dog moment. Going back to Batman versus the Joker makes a lot of good points. It's like, hey, Batman, you kick the crap out of people, but you don't eliminate threats to society in any sort of meaningful way. And they keep coming back and doing worse things. You're piling up the bodies. And then he goes and beats the stuffing out of Harley Quinn. And you're like, oh, that's the kick the dog moment. Or poisons the water supply and kills thousands of people. But your protagonist has to have a save the cat moment, and your antagonist has to have a kick the dog moment. And it has to be significant enough whereby your audience, whether it is your fellow players, your DM, or the people watching your stream, can latch onto that and then believe in you.
And if you're and it doesn't necessarily, it just has to be a moment of humanity. It doesn't have to be like a big heroic moment, because for me, the save the cat moment in Mothership was actually like for the audience and for the other players, the moment for Kai was when we were in Kai's mind palace and they were describing the items that they see as Petty and Nyx. That was the moment when the audience and the players were suddenly on Kai's side. It wasn't that Kai saved anyone, but it was that moment of, oh, this is whatever the outward presentation is, this is what this person sees. This is a genuine thing.
Yeah, this is where the heart and the humanity lies. And this is where the void exists, where the heart and humanity should be for your villain. So Todd, so Kay has way more experience with way more systems than I do. I've only played 4 or 5 systems, but I'd argue the system that I've encountered with the most robust character personality system is Vampire the Masquerade. Because you run through the character creator in Vampire the Masquerade, and suddenly you know what clan you're a part of. You know what type of vampire that you are, which indicates a lot of how you were turned. And that speaks to where you are politically in the system, and both your clan and the type of vampire that you are, and other really important aspects of the character development greatly informs and influences what type of person your character is.
And, we were just talking about, I like creating characters. I like creating weird and interesting and using the system in ways that wasn't intended. And only one character has broken the system. I've mostly handicapped myself with things, but I really don't enjoy character creation in Vampire the Masquerade. I feel like a lot of my agency is taken away. I feel like the system itself doesn't let me play the character I want to play. I'm sure with the right DM and the right campaign, I can just be like, cool, like, this is what, I can play it, and I do have fun with it, but I'm like, if I could just change, like, these 3 little things, I could play a really interesting character. I just like being weird.
I would have never imagined. So there are lots of different ways to get into your character. You can definitely, it is highly encouraged that you talk to your DM, especially if you're having trouble creating your character. And when you make your character, it's important to have history, motivation, strengths, and flaws, even if you don't feel particularly compelled to get super deep into them. Yeah. Like, you don't have to be like Kay, you don't have to be like me, where you dive super deep. And like, one of my players, I was like, hey, you need to get me a family tree. And he was like, huh? And I was like, I need like 3 generations of family tree to make this work. And he was like, okay. And he got it to me, which was great. But then I used that to build characters that could interact with his player character in a really personal way. And that ended up being, but he hadn't thought of any of that before I asked him about it. And so, like, there are all these like, history, motivation, strength, flaws. And like I said, with the example of the alligators and the nuns and the vampires, you don't have to necessarily get that deep. And that is an important distinction to make when you are a DM, because it's not just players that make characters, DMs make characters. And there are 2 types of characters that DMs make. They make NPCs and they make DMPCs. And a non-player character is sort of like your generic quest giver, or someone who performs a rudimentary function that you don't necessarily need to have all that information for. Like, if there is a dock worker at a bar that spreads a rumor that your players latch onto and then follow, you don't need to have 3 generations of that guy's family tree. You don't need to have
I'm a
all
fifth
that
generation
depth.
hole watcher. Sorry.
Right. Whereas there are characters in your campaigns that definitely do need more thought put into their history and especially their motivations. And that is your antagonist, your big bad, their assistants and henchmen, like, their main lieutenants, and other people that have deeper connections to the party and the story. Like, I I feel like, no, I always design a DMPC that is a touchstone for the players, because players need a reliable way to get information about the world that isn't necessarily commonplace. They need a place to get bits of lore and history and current events without having to sit down and read journal entries or go to a library or these other boring ways of getting information. Even something as simple as, hey, this person is a notable person in town. I just showed up in town. Where would I find this person? And so giving your players 1 or 2 DMPCs that, yes, work as quest givers, and yes, can be someone as simple as a bartender at a tavern, but being your sort of touchstone that is your story interpreter for your characters or for your players is really important. And those characters, in addition to your big bad and their lieutenants and other major characters, it's really important to know their history and motivations, because they can't just be this one-dimensional, I give these characters whatever they want. They have to have their own motivations and their own drive and their own goals in order to be interesting and fully fleshed out.
And you have to be ready for your characters to be like, that's a cool DMPC. I'm not interested in them. Tell me about this guy over here. And you're like, I just made that's
Yeah.
Ken. I just made him up 2 seconds ago. Okay, hold on. Like if they start coming back and start asking for Ken, I'm without revealing too many spoilers, like in Critical Role, Matt had a character who was potentially going to be the big bad, was going to be the warmonger, was going to be a bad villain in the game. And the entire party went, nope, we like him. We're not letting him go. No, we like him. And ended up joining, being the only non-party member in the final encounter against the big bad. So yeah, sometimes you have to just, okay, well, that DMPC shelved. Hold on, let me figure out 3 generations of this person now.
And notice that when I've talked about characters, I have not talked about physical appearance at all. Because everybody has sat down at a table and played in a game where one of the characters had a visible scar, and that scar had a story behind it. And that's an easy way to do it. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying that is an easy way to generate history and information about a character. And in the games that people play with me, most of the people that they interact with don't necessarily have physical descriptions. Now, if I include physical descriptions, those descriptions are relevant to storytelling. So if you have a powerful witch, there's going to be a different perception of her if she is tall and extremely thin with long spindly fingers versus squat, kind of chubby, and like more like homey and mother matronly. um, and the same thing with your bartenders or your merchants. There are people that the accoutrement that you have can tell a story. And like, Sherlock Holmes is famous for being like, oh, you shave right-handed and you shaved at this time in the morning because your shave is uneven this way, or you have this particular type of ink on your cuffs and therefore you do such and such. And only give those details if it's relevant to your character, relevant to your players, or relevant to the story.
Yeah.
Like Roxy's Roxy is a devotee to the flying spaghetti monster, and pirates are holy people. And so if Roxy runs into somebody who has a tricorner hat and a ruffled shirt and a parrot on the shoulder, those are important details for Roxy. Whereas if those things are missing, then it doesn't matter. So it's important, like the details you give are just as important as the details you leave out. And it's important to, as both a player and a DM, to leave out details that don't matter.
Yeah. And if you are a DM finding yourself in a situation with a character who has too much backstory, or you start looking at this backstory and it's needlessly convoluted, or it's just you're getting any of those warning signs, don't kill the character, talk to the player. This is I spend a lot of time playing with people who are new to D&D, and the first thing they do in the first fight, they're like, big monster shows up, I'm gonna shoot it in the eye. Well, that's a called shot, it's really difficult. Why are you trying to shoot the dragon? Like, you can explain to them and they're like, cool, I'm gonna shoot it in the eye again. And then if they manage to shoot it in the eye, and you're like, cool, you shot it in the eye, it takes piercing damage. And they're like, oh, it's not blinded. Well, you just went through all of that. The player didn't get what they wanted because what they were trying to do was blind the character. And if you say, what do you, okay, you're doing a lot, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you after, right? And usually that can be, again, I feel like a lot of times when people write these really obtuse backgrounds, it is because they're trying to have some sort of control, or they're trying to connect with the world in a way. Or they think, some people like, I'm royalty, so if I'm royalty, I'll have power because I'll be able to command these people to help me. And you can be like, okay, so no. If you're a princess, you don't get an army. But also, like, offer them plot hooks. Hey, tell you what, give me, and I've done this before, and I really like this system, where it's all like, cool, give me 3 NPCs that are important to your character. And maybe, you'll be able to, maybe the DM will play them, maybe they're not, but they just know that there are 3 characters, they get to describe their physicality, they get to describe their relationship, and I, as the DM, will honor this relationship. If you tell me you were best friends, I will not turn around and say, this character was actually planning to betray you your whole childhood, they hate you because of a thing you didn't know about. Unless you tell me that's something you want or are open to, right? I will give you autonomy and control over that, because there is a fear among a lot of players of, if I have a history, if I have family, the DM will kill them. And that's valid. I have characters who I have left family alive specifically because I'm like, DM, here is a gift. Use it to hurt me.
Right.
But if you give people, like, why? Like, you want to be nobility. Why? Do you just want, is that just a story, a power fantasy you're wanting to explore? Are you trying to get something out of it? Do you want to have notability? You don't have to be nobility to have notability. You could be a famous bard. Like, what do you what do you want to do? Offer them NPCs that they can create or you can create, offer them ins to the stories, and that usually gets them excited. Also, if you see a chance where you can kind of, and Rich talked about this at the end of Mothership the other night, of like, reuse material and cross things over whenever possible. You know, if I did a little bit of this. I did a little bit of this in Godplane. I'm going to talk about this and try to not like reveal it too much, but like, I knew that I wanted two characters to have a background that connected them, but a very long time apart. So without telling either character what had happened, I took one character's backstory, edited it so that time had distorted it, and gave it to a different character. So this character is telling fairy tales that are shockingly familiar to one of the other players. Why? That was for the party to figure out. And it was so much fun. And I actually had, I won't call out who. I actually had someone who watched it, who knows me, be like, that was really cool, like how you got the player, like didn't realize that the players had figured that out, that I hadn't told them that was the thing. So any chance, like, in Critical Role, there was a character who was cursed, and we found out that the character that cursed, the NPC that cursed that character, had also cursed the family member of a different person in the party. And suddenly, those two people are united. So if you can put a background together, great. But even if you can just take, oh, these two things, these are two completely separate backgrounds, but one thing could have influenced both, then you've just suddenly given the party a common cause. And ooh, do they get mad? Ooh, do they get motivated when that happens?
So what we said at the top of the show of, you know, I don't like framing this as necessarily giving advice, but rather sharing our perspective and insights. And part of why I love doing these is because I learn a lot too. And that old DM in chat said, let the players describe the NPC, let them cast the world. And that's not something I've done before. And it's a really, really, really great idea. Mm-hmm. And so that is something that I now have in my collection of tools that I can use as a DM. And
not checking your journal.
And that is something that can not just be folded in, but can impact the evolution of games that I run mm-hmm. and games that I'm a part of. Because, you know, like in games where I am a player, I don't necessarily think about, oh, well, what does mom and dad look like? What does the person who slaughtered my family look like?
Well, even beyond that, David, this is a really useful tool for like, and this has happened to you a couple times. You're like, I'm going to throw up a love interest, and there's like no reaction. It's all like, hey, you guys walk in, you see someone working the bar, you know, they're really attractive. Character name, what do they look like?
Right.
And Gabe did this too, and I kind of hijacked Gabe with it. But when I was playing Roxy in his charity stream, he's like, "Flying Spaghetti Monster appears," and I'm like, "Does the air around me smell like fresh cooked pasta?" And he was like, "Yes!" Like you could see the joy that I made this bigger, and there was no way they were going to stop me.
And so it's important that when you're thinking about characters and you're thinking about the world that they inhabit, as a player and as a DM, that you are thoughtful in your approaches to how you construct them. Because sometimes the difference between your character or one of your players being really engaged and checking their Twitter while you're describing a scene is, like Kay said, they walk into a bar, they see someone attractive, and then you prompt them and say, hey, what does this person look like? What is attractive to your character? And it is, and the point of all of this is to increase the collaborative nature of the storytelling, make the storytelling more fulfilling, and also from a DM's perspective, to increase and lock down engagement for your players.
And I'll also say, offering your players, especially if you have diverse people at the table, the chance to explain what other people look like is going to increase your diversity. Because I know one of my favorite, well, Gabe has talked about, he's like, my character in Shakar is bisexual, but no one's asked, and no one's put me in a space with an attractive bi or gay man, so I've only ever flirted with women in the game. But no one's asked, but he is bisexual, right? And if you give someone the opportunity, if you walk in and you see, like, oh, this, I see someone who's black, or oh, I see not a woman, but a man, or maybe I'm just a little bit freaky and I see a minotaur. Look, I'm here for that story.
Yeah, no judging. And something I hadn't considered is it gives you an opportunity to avoid a lot of common pitfalls. For instance, if you're playing with a black person and you're like, hey, describe so and so, then you're not a white person describing someone's skin tone as food. And the number of times,
Especially not chocolate.
ooh wee, the number of times I, as an editor, have looked down at a document and gone and saw her creamy chocolate skin, or her almond eyes, or any of the other, like, not super offensive but just questionable descriptions of people's skin tone and features, where I've had to circle them and then argue with the white person and go, hey, maybe don't do this. And they push back and they're like, well, they do look like a Hershey chocolate bar. That's not the point. And also, in numerous forums that I've been a part of on the internet, including NaNoWriMo before the pandemic, one of the big critiques that one of the writers that I was looking at got was, hey, this is all, this whole section, this whole character description, why is it here? And also, why is it offensive? And they were like, huh? What do you mean offensive? And so if you could say, hey, because if I'm sitting there and I'm like, listen, I'm playing a black guy, and then you ask me what my character looks like, and then I say, oh man, he looks like a milk dud, then, like, that's going to be very, very different than Kay saying, look at Idris Elba's smooth, chocolatey skin and his dark, velvety, luscious, aromatic voice. Like, this is totally different. It's totally different. And, she would be right about Idris Elba, but that you don't do that. And so that is another sort of interesting way that you can avoid some trouble and also encourage engagement with your players.
And you start to find out what your players, really want to see. And yeah, asking who's, if someone hangs up, right? If someone panics, because sometimes you put people in different, look, I got a dear friend who I love playing with who, like, asks for a description and you can hear the moment of panic as the wheel turns. And that's a great prompt from Battle DM, which is, who's playing the character? Who's the actress or actor playing the character? Just give me are we talking David Bowie? Are we talking The Rock? Like, just who's playing the character? It's great. It's a great shorthand. So yes, I think we have gone really, really deep into this one. So as a chronic overwriter, again, I will say, number one, it's just a bad take. Don't be like, unless you're playing a game where that is what everyone is doing and has signed up to do, don't be the DM who's just trying to kill your characters, your players' characters. That's not...
It's not your job to kill your characters. It's your characters' jobs to kill themselves.
And I have said, as a DM, the way I look at especially if I'm running a longer campaign, it is my job to make your characters into heroes, which means I have to make that process as painful as possible until they get there. But it's all with the point of you went through something terrible, so now you're awesome. Right? You have grown from it. And if you watched The God Plane, I did some really mean things to those characters. But I also like to think that I gave every character a pretty fulfilling, happy ending. I mean, Jen will still never forgive me, but that's Jen. Jen won't forgive me for a lot of things. If you're a chronic overwriter like me and you want to not upset your DM, you know, make a TLDR, make a shorthand of like, here's some plot hooks I think you can use. And of course, just talk to your DM. Hey, because that's, I had one game where I was looking at like, I'm looking between these two characters. I'm really invested in both of these characters. Which one would fit better? And one of them was this, you know, this illegitimate noble character. And they're like, that wouldn't work with this game. I don't have a kingdom anywhere where that would work. And I'm like, cool, that character's out. That made this real easy. Time to focus on this one. Make sure, you know, tell the story. If you're writing, if you're like me and you write to get to know your character, keep in mind, write what your character knows. Tell your DM what your character knows. Feel free to point out what your character doesn't know, because that can often be just as much fun. And again, there's a difference between saying like, hey, the kingdom my character is from are like the peacekeepers of the world, and they're like a great, awesome group of people. Cool, that's what your character thinks, because maybe they've been quietly oppressing several other things. Maybe there's, you know...
Maybe they're outfitted by Hugo Boss.
Right. Your DM is going to change things and make things fit to tell a more exciting story. So if there is something that is important to you, to your character, to your story, that is near to your heart, if you're like, please don't let this character betray me, tell your DM. And if your DM does that anyway, without warning you, then they're a jerk, right? If you're really protective about something, write what your character knows. Be aware that what your character knows might be different from reality. And if you really, it's just like discussing lines and veils. Like, hey, look, my character has a sibling, or my character's really close to their mom, you know, FYI, IRL, this isn't me speaking, this is theoretical. Like, I lost my mom like a year ago. Please don't kill my character's mother. I, as a player, cannot emotionally deal with my character going through that. If your DM doesn't respect that, if they don't think they can tell a good story without using that plot point, they're not a good DM. Don't play with them. Build in plot points, work with your DM to hook your character into the world, and you'll have more fun. Finding out what you don't know is just as much fun as having what you do know revealed.
And when building a character, whether PC or DMPC, remember the 4 pillars of history, motivation, strength, and flaws. If you have a DMPC, they have to have their own agenda. They have to have their own interests and their own goals, or else they're just going to be a little vending machine whenever your characters need something.
And there's nothing more fun as a player than finding out, like, wait, my favorite DMPC is hooking up with that person on the side.
And it doesn't have to necessarily always be betrayal. Like Miss Cat was a perfect example of a DMPC, where Miss Cat helped the party achieve their goal in service of their own self-interest. And in the short run, and even the medium run, the fallout from that was all good. Now, long term, that's a question mark, but that is part of what makes the addition and development of Miss Cat good storytelling, is because it still asks the question. And it would be very different if Miss Cat just showed up and was like, hey, you guys need help, here's your help. Why? Because you need help.
Right.
And that's way less interesting.
And again, it doesn't have to be anything even bad, right? I'm a brag on Stephanie, and one of the home games I play with my himbo bard, we ran into this flamboyant pirate. Like the pirate who was so flamboyant that the other pirates left them behind when they went to go hunt treasure, because they're like, nah, we can't with this one. We meet this flamboyant pirate who explains that the pirates are missing and, you know, all this other stuff. And then we go and ended up renting staying at a place that had a burlesque show. And so my character gets in on the performance, wakes up covered in glitter and feathers and, you know, in a puppy pile of all the different performers.
As we've all done once or twice.
It was very happy bard, right? Very happy bard. We go back to meet with this pirate the next day, and that pirate's covered in glitter and feathers. And we're like, you were there? And they're like, you know about the burlesque? And we're like, next time. And they're like, next time I have a box. And we're like, yeah, like, and we already liked that NPC. Now we love that NPC because they're dimensional. They do the same things that we do, but they can do it without us.
Matt Mercer's Gilmore is another good example, because while Gilmore has other interests in a particular, like if you've watched the Amazon series, because that's what I'm referencing here, it's literally like, you're cute and I find you fascinating, therefore you get a discount.
There was a little more than that in the series, but
right, but it's a lot more than you can't afford it, therefore the DM has to make it so that you can afford it. There's this interest and this connection and this charisma there that leans into this interaction that this player has to have. And it also makes it more interesting because everyone hates shopping episodes. But when your shopping episode is flirting with Gilmore, then that's going to be more interesting.
One of the shopping episodes was literally Vax flirting with Gilmore, convincing him to leave the shop so that he wouldn't stop blocking them on discounts and go get day drunk on wine with him while everyone else finishes the shopping.
Right.
It was a bad idea because Gilmore actually was more likely to give them discounts as it turned out, but it was a hilarious episode. So, I think that about covers all of our stuff. Again, communication is really important.
I actually have 2 more points.
Oh boy, 2 more points.
So when it comes to characters, I would encourage everyone, especially DMs and players who play on streams, to avoid stereotypes and to use stereotypes to make a more interesting character. Because I've made going back to the witch who is the sort of like interactive touchstone for the party. The witch isn't just like brewing a big old potion over a pot and going, I'm gonna get so and so and curse so, like, just not generic evil witch, but also not like Glenda the Witch of the West either. But instead, she makes beer, which witches do, and has a more complicated backstory and more complicated motivations than even the party has discovered yet. And hopefully they get there, but there's a lot more to her than this is default witch who curses people and, you know, knows the old things. And you can take stereotypes and subvert them and make people question how they perceive a character, and really massage things to make them more dynamic and more interesting. And the other main point is decide on your character's morality. Like, you don't have to be good, you don't have to be evil, you could be gray, you can be lawful, you could be, but
chaotic, stupid.
Even if the system you're playing doesn't demand it, which frankly I don't think it should be archetypal thing for most characters. Like getting into paladins is a whole different thing. But it's important to know what way your moral compass points, because if you don't, then your character will seem to react and behave erratically and randomly.
And you can definitely, like, our first campaign that we played together, like, I felt my character drift. I thought they were going to be one way. And with the chaos of the party, they were drifting another very quickly. And that's not failure. That's not, like, Jen was saying earlier, she thinks she knows how her character's going to react, and then they do something different. That's not bad. That's not a failing. That's often, sometimes you get so into the character and you get so into the situation that you're like, oh, what I thought was going to happen hasn't. Is this still, because there have been a couple times in our games where I've had to be like, is this me reacting or is this the character reacting, right? And sometimes that can get blurry, and sometimes, there is a reaction, and that might mean that you as the player need to say, I am actually not okay with this. That might just be, I need to sit down and figure out, where the separation is, and am I okay with that separation? It just might be, no, this character just is different than I thought, and that's fine.
And when you know the sort of moral direction, like what a character thinks is right, what a character thinks is wrong, how self-interested versus altruistic a character is, that helps you shape their motivations. That helps shape their strengths. That helps shape their flaws. If they're really altruistic, then maybe they're also really gullible. If they're really altruistic, if they're really self-interested, maybe they were altruistic at one point, but had been taken advantage of so often that the world beat them down enough so that they were only self-interested. And it can add a lot of flavor and depth to your character. But the most important aspect of understanding that morality is consistency.
And Jen also said, like, her character for Street Wolves coming up, Korean American in 1987, has a backstory that doesn't have an accent. Like, don't feel like you have to play a character or do an accent, especially if it's an accent that isn't, I don't want to say native to, but like is not connected to your history and your culture. That's a really...
Yeah, you won't catch me doing an Asian accent on screen.
Yeah, don't do that. But also sometimes just leaning into, like, this is a stereotype, and I'm gonna do what doesn't make sense, but just lean, or what is opposite the stereotype, and leaning super hard into it can be really, really fun. Kat, whom I played in the Cyberpunk game, I actually originally created for 5e, and I wanted just a human soldier, older woman, seen it all, and had kind of come home to protect her people, a little bit jaded. And I knew I wanted her to have just the biggest, like a big cigar and a big warhammer. And like, I knew that's what I wanted. And I went back and forth about what's this character going to be. And I decided I wanted her to be tiny. I decided I just wanted her to be super tiny. And so my initial thought was dwarf, tiny dwarf woman with a hammer. And look, I want to play a lady dwarf really bad because I want a beard desperately. But the more I thought about it, I know, just tilt that head. I know, just go for it. The more I thought about it, I'm like, what if, I was like, what if I made her a tiefling? What if I made her this tiny, like 5'0" tiefling who's like 5'6" because of the horns, right? Like, and that became like something I was playing with. But then I kind of just went, I kind of just want her to be a human. And the idea of this completely normal human woman who grew up in a small town, went and joined the soldiers, became a soldier, went and fought a bunch of pointless wars, saw that she wasn't making the world a better place, got out of service, came home, and is protecting her people with this giant hammer. Like, decided, this is the place I grew up, I actually like these people, I'm gonna protect them. 5'0" with a hammer and bossing everyone around was such a fun idea that making her any kind of supernatural thing almost felt to me like I was taking away from the character. I was distracting from the fact that that's all this woman is. So, find the stereotype, decide if it works, and if it doesn't work, completely turn it around. No, make her not the dwarf. What's more interesting? A dwarf woman with a giant hammer, or a tiny dwarf-sized human woman with a giant hammer? I know what I had fun with. And thank you all. Cat was so much fun to play, and she was not prepared. She was not prepared for Dollface. That little girl just blew her mind. She that was adorable. So yes, I think that about wraps it up. Unless chat has anything else super pressing. Thank you all for hanging out, chat. Thank you for your questions. I hope we answered them well. I hope you had fun. I hope you enjoyed the wonderful hot take that we found and dug into. Again, I'm not showing the original because I'm not giving a platform to this person. Thank you for hanging out, for sharing your experiences and your advice. We've gotten some great tips. I know a tip David has stolen, and one that
absolutely.
I knew, but I haven't used it recently, and I need to fix that. So thank you, Richard. We are going to have Richard That'll DM on here sooner or later. We're going to figure out when. Again, thank you for spending your evening with us. Thank you for being awesome in chat. If you see any hot takes or you have topics you would like us to cover or questions you'd like us to ask, please hit us up. We are going to...
definitely contact either Kay and I either on Twitter or on Discord. In our Discord server, please suggest things that you want us to talk about.
Oh, I need to update our message. Yes, that's that. I'm Kay. I'm signing off. I don't have a game this Sunday. I might cry about that. But you can see me Saturday on the Saucefires, who was hanging out in chat earlier, on the Mercy Road 3 charity stream benefiting Child's Play. I'm the first leg of a 24-hour stream playing with Brian Gray, starting at noon Eastern at Saucefire. And then we will see you right back here next Tuesday for TuesDnD. We have, like I said, we're working on doing some non-streamed tables as well as a play-by-post campaign in my Discord, if you're interested in doing any of that. And, David, do you have anything to promote?
Just the stuff that we're working on that we can't talk about yet.
Yeah, so I got a couple things that I'm really excited to talk about someday. They will not be under NDA. So, thank you again for hanging out. You all are amazing. I so appreciate you. Have a great night. I'm going to see who we can raid over, and we will see you next Tuesday. Thank you all for being amazing and being so supportive. We can't tell you how much we appreciate it.